Men. While I was there, I had an idea. I thought it was a great idea. Selling ice cream to employ the homeless. Job creation was a key strategy. I thought everybody, including the bankers, would come running to help me establish the first Ben & Jerry's scoop shop in the inner city, right on 125th Street in the heart of Harlem. I figured that hiring formerly homeless men and channeling profits to support Hawk Homes were ideas worthy of support. Little did I know that business projects, no matter how noble, don't happen simply because they are good ideas. You must have access to capital. I didn't, and most inner city entrepreneurs don't. No capital access, no job creation. It's just that simple. What's not so simple is how to foster grassroots enterprise in impoverished communities. The critical facts of my deal scared away all the lenders. They didn't like the fact that this was the first Ben & Jerry's in a distressed neighborhood, that we planned to hire the homeless, that we'd be located in the heart of Harlem. None of the banks would touch it except for one, Community Capital Bank of Brooklyn. Lyndon Comstock, Steve Lane, and their colleagues at CCB were not troubled by the uniqueness of my deal, so they became my bridge over the troubled waters of unfriendly financing. Urban poverty will persist without the broad-based support for grassroots enterprises and the kind of community-sensitive lending that this Ben & Jerry's project in Harlem represents. And grassroots enterprise needs access to capital. The significant outcome in Harlem is not simply the establishment of an enterprise that empowers the hard to employ. The unanticipated value can now be seen in the new symbols of hope in the community these days. The formerly homeless helping each other to rise, other grassroots businesses popping up, and children with ice cream cones, with role models, and with smiles. If this legislation being announced today can indeed be passed, there will be many more jobs and much more hope and many more smiles.
Let me say to all of you that I have dreamed of this day for a long time. The possibility to sign this act into law, and more importantly, to unleash the energies of millions of Americans too long denied access to the mainstream economics of our country, was one of the things that drove me into the campaign of 1992. Today, the $4.8 billion in credit for new businesses and new jobs into communities and into people who need it the most is the beginning of those stories, countless thousands of them all across this country. It's also good for our economy. We have got to find ways to reach into the isolated areas of America to bring the promise of America. Ultimately, that is what this whole idea of community development, financial institutions are all about. And I know that we can do that.
Good evening and welcome to the Clinton Presidential Center. My name is Victoria DiFrancesco Soto, and I am the Dean of the Clinton School of Public Service. In just a few moments, you will have two questions posed to you. How do you create generational wealth? And how do you teach others to create generational wealth? In other words, how do you allow people to thrive? And in the words of President Clinton that we just heard, how do we fulfill that American promise? These are the questions that Arlo Washington asks in the opening moments of the Oscar-nominated film, The Barber of Little Rock, which we will all see tonight. The Barber of Little Rock documents Washington's efforts to advance equity and to create opportunity. He does this behind the Barber chair, but through the creation and management of People Loan Trust Fund and Community, one of 1,500 CDFIs across the nation. CDFIs that were the vision of President Clinton that came to fruition in 1994 in order to provide equity in banking. Watching this documentary reminds me that the solutions to problems are almost always exclusively from within the community. That small determined actions lead to impactful change. At the Clinton School of Public Service, one of the first things that we teach our students in their community engaged research is you serve, you do not steer. You don't just listen, you hear. And tonight, we get to hear, we get to learn from the filmmakers, from the producers, from our very own Dr. Jay Barth, the director of the library here. And it is my pleasure to introduce our panelists for tonight, who will be engaging in a conversation following the film. They are Arlo Washington, directors John Hoffman and Christine Turner, and we welcome back to the CPC producer Taren Robinson. Ladies and gentlemen, the Barber of Little Rock.
Wonderful. So congratulations to all of y'all on this magnificent documentary. And thank you for your work on behalf of our community, but also for allowing your story to be shared. So thank you very much. So I'm glad y'all are all here. We've got one last film before we get started with our conversation from one more person that you might know.
And welcome to Clinton Presidential Center, where we're thrilled to be showcasing the powerful 2024 Academy Award nominated documentary short film, The Barber of Little Rock. Directed by John Hoffman and Christine Turner, the film explores America's widening racial wealth gap through the story of Arlo Washington, a local barber whose visionary approach to a just economy can be seen in the mission of People Trust, the nonprofit community bank, known as a Community Development Financial Institution, or CDFI, that he founded. I've been deeply involved in the CDFI movement since I was governor. And as president, I was proud to sign the CDFI fund, which supports People Trust in the law. Arlo Washington is a living embodiment of this program in action, and an illustration of how a community can be changed by giving people access to capital and including them in the banking system. The truth is, addition and multiplication work a whole lot better than subtraction and division. And anytime you're able to expand the number of people fully participating in the economic life of our country, good things are going to happen. Relatively small investments in things like expanding access to basic affordable banking services, the ability to finance home ownership, or the startup capital for small businesses can have an outsized impact on people's lives and on the economy as a whole. What we need now is greater investment in CDFIs so that more leaders like Arlo can reshape what banking looks like for people who've been left out and left behind for far too long, all across our country. Doing so will help us to build a new inclusive economy that gives every American the chance to succeed. I hope you enjoy the screening and the conversation. And I send my best wishes to Arlo, Washington and People Trust for many, many more years of leadership in the community.
So I want to start with the filmmakers, and I know that y'all wanted, when this whole process began, you had a vision of telling a story about how a small business could make a difference in its community. And so I'll start with you, Christine. Tell us about the journey that led y'all to Little Rock, led you to find Arlo, and convince you that this was the right story as the centerpiece of that broader tale.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having us, and thank you all for being here tonight. This is a very special screening for us to do here in Little Rock with you all, so thank you. John and I wanted to make a film looking at the racial wealth gap. And in the course of our research, we came across a book called The Color of Money by Mirza Baradaran, which looks at how the Black community has been systematically shut out of the American banking system. And in the book, she talks a lot about CDFIs. And this was not something that John and I were very familiar with, the CDFI fund. We really came to learn about it through the book. But we were pointed to a conversation between President Clinton and Donna Gambrell, who was the first director of the CDFI fund. And we decided, let's reach out to Donna. And in doing so, she told us, there's this guy, Arlo. We told her we're interested in making a film. We want to embed in a CDFI. For us, we felt like this was an opportunity to sort of witness those who are living the racial wealth gap, but also those who are committed to narrowing it. And so when we reached out to Donna, we explained to her, we want to make an observational film and we want to do it inside of a CDFI. And she said, well, there's this guy, Arlo, in Little Rock, and he has a Barber college. And on the parking lot of his Barber college is a converted shipping container with a nonprofit loan fund called People Trust. And you got to meet him. And sure enough, we did. And we knew right then and there, here was our subject. So that's how we were pointed to Arlo. That's how we learned about CDFIs. And from there, the rest is history.
John, anything you want to add?
No, I think that is the story. I think that it might be an appropriate time now because it's Arlo, but it's a whole team of people who make People Trust possible. And there's a whole team of people who were behind the camera. Some of them are here tonight, really important people. And they're, very importantly, they're people who were willing to open up their lives to us, who allow us to film them. I would like all the people who work at People Trust at Barber College on the film and are in the film, if they could stand up right now.
Thank you. Thanks for doing that, John. Taren, would you like to talk a little bit about your part of the process?
Yes, I actually was part of the process. I am, what I will say is that my connection to the film came as a result of my connection to the Clinton Foundation. I received a call from a former Clinton colleague who told me that they were looking for someone locally to help to produce the film. And so she put me in touch with John and Christine, and the rest is history. And I briefly had met Arlo because of the Clinton Foundation as well. When I was here, when I worked at the Clinton Foundation, we were looking for a barber to come and cut hair for a back to school program. And Arlo not only showed up because we thought, oh, he'll bring a bag with some clippers in it. Arlo actually showed up with himself, all of the barber chairs from the barber school, and 6 barbers. And on that day, they cut about 90 kids' hair. So his leadership, I think, servant leadership is definitely what it is, but it shines through in everything that he does. and I saw it day in and day out when we were filming. And that, I think, is very important to say.
If I may, I just want to give extra attention to Taren and to Christina Avalos, who is our producer, who is sitting right there. We could not have made this film without Christina, and we know we could not have made this film without Taren. Taren's connections to the city of Little Rock are just unparalleled, and it was Taren's just unbelievable devotion to the mission of this film, and her commitment to all the other people who stood up. That really, we traveled in, we flew here, Taren lives here. And you just can't make the kind of film that we made without having someone who is on the ground. And she's just, she covers a lot of ground.
Thank you.
So, Arlo, let's talk about your own experiences as the subject of this film. How did you decide to say yes? Because you didn't have to say yes. And could you share with us any of the challenging moments you faced during the process of making this film?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for asking that question. Thanks for having me. Thanks everyone for coming. When you asked the question about what I had to think about when they asked me about the film, my wife, we had to have a serious conversation with my family and with my staff to see how everybody felt about it. See, how do you feel about, being filmed for a year, having cameras, what about the participants that utilize the services that we offer? We don't want to feel like we're exploiting our community. And so, it was something that we had to think about, we had to pray about, and, we were, assured, and trust was established on the front end through John and Christina and Christine, that they would just be in the room and disappear. And the photographers, Tony Hardman and Andy, I mean, they did an excellent job of just not getting in the way, because, this is everyday life for us. And so, trust was established and integrity level was kept really high. So the process, as far as, I wake up some mornings, it's like, well, Andy's outside and it's 5:30 a.m. or 6 a.m. I'm like, what? So, and, or those intimate moments, there was a lot that didn't get put into the film. Maybe we're at dinner, maybe we're seeing our daughter off to college. Those intimate moments that you really like to keep private. They had cameras there and there were other people there. But again, we all became close and it just felt natural and like family and organic and authentic.
Great. So obviously for the filmmakers, a lot of developing an effective documentary is building trust. It requires a certain amount of intimacy and opening up, as Arlo described. How did y'all go about gaining the trust of Arlo, but perhaps even more importantly, gaining the trust of the clients of People Trust and the other folks who are on staff, to make them feel comfortable enough to tell their somewhat challenging stories?
Well, thank you for focusing so much on trust, because there is no documentary without trust. It's entirely built on trust relationships. So Arlo talks about the conversations that we had with him and then with his wife, Devaney. They were long conversations. They happened over a course of weeks. And we came with their permission, but we had to maintain their trust the whole time. So the conversations didn't stop. It was an ongoing conversation about trust and about our process. In terms of the willingness of the people and many of everyone who stood here tonight to be on camera, it unfolded in a natural way. And But it all started with Arlo, and Arlo having the trust in us, and the comfort that he displayed in front of the camera. He's an unusually good documentary subject because he is so comfortable on camera and does forget that the camera is there. And I think that that influenced everyone else who was around him, either because they're staff or the people walking in. And Taren was an enormous part of that because she was doing a lot of sort of advanced work with people that we knew we wanted to meet, that we wanted to film, or with people walking in the door and not really know what's happening with the cameras and the lights and things like that. So, you know, it was Christina, it was all of us, but I think that without the comfort that Taren and Arlo projected, we would not have succeeded.
Christina, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I would just add that, I mean, you saw a number of interviews that happened, you know, sprinkled throughout the film. Those came later in the process. So it was an opportunity for us through the process of filming over and over to get to know people very slowly. And we assured people that this was an opportunity to have your voice heard and to say something and to share your perspective, and how important it was for this not only to be one man's story, but also a community's portrait. So that's in part, I think, why people believed in participating in the film. They believed in the mission of People Trust, and they understood what it was that we were trying to get out there to the public.
Taren, anything you'd like to add? You were watching all this happen.
I definitely was watching everything happen. I think for me, I think the pivotal point when we talk about trust was the conversation that I had with Debony, Arlo's wife. And there was a point at which she was like, I'm not sure if I can do this, because it is a lot to open up your life to someone and to have it live in film forever. And I remember her thinking that I was having a conversation about encouraging her on how to move forward, but the conversation actually turned and it encouraged me on how to move forward. So I think the street of trust goes both ways. So to speak to trust, that's definitely kind of what I felt and what I took away in that moment. But they're good people, and I think that something really good came out of the situation.
Awesome. So the video before Dean Soto spoke, as well as President Clinton's remarks, you know, highlighted his administration's work on the legislation that created the CDFI program. Excuse me. So for the filmmakers, you talked a little bit about some of the research you did to kind of familiarize yourself with CDFIs and their impact. And what surprised you the most as you kind of came to learn that story about these events of 30 years ago? And I think it's important to note that we're celebrating the 30th anniversary of this really amazing achievement of the Clinton administration.
I mean, I think for one of the things that we learned just from being on the ground and trailing Arlo is just how important it is for CDFIs to be, you know, run and operated by people who are of and from the community. And that's, I think, a large part of why People Trust is so effective. So we were drawn to him. We felt that he would be an important voice for CDFIs, for Black-led CDFIs in particular. And we were just amazed at how much attention he gave to every single person who he came across in the course of a day. You know, he would be stopped all the time. We would be in the middle of filming one thing and someone would come up to him and you know, we constantly throughout the day, and really just, it struck us how much need there was in the community. But he gave every single person who he encountered time and attention, and he was present with them. We see that in the film so much. And so he really stands out to us. And yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Anything else?
I think maybe a different approach to the same question is really coming to understand the power of President Clinton's insight. That communities that have been excluded from the financial system for so long, and this is what we were aiming to make a film about, this racial wealth gap, and that if you don't have access to capital, you cannot accumulate property. You cannot generate generational wealth. And so his understanding that there had to be an entirely different approach to getting capital into different communities that have been excluded. To see and to live the power of a piece of legislation, an insight into a structural flaw or historic wrongs that have to be righted. That was very powerful to see, how one man can be making a difference. But it's one man who became president who understood inequality as President Clinton did. And it's Arlo's just refusal to accept these inequities that are around him. So I think that I think it was surprising to be able to feel it so evidently and to see it unfolding in such, powerful ways over and over and over again. And I think that to share with an audience, what is, this sort of completely unacceptable history of redlining, and again with legislation that thankfully some people had the strength and the conviction to pass the CRA Act, to try to right those wrongs. And I think that if we can share some of that history and make it real for people what that means, because there's too many people who have no idea what that really means. So I think that those were some of the unexpected experiences of seeing it, in such evident ways, the good and the bad.
Yeah. Arlo, do you remember when you first heard about CDFIs?
Yes, it was 2013, I believe.
I think we're good now. Yeah,
2013, and I had an uncle that worked at a CDFI in Chicago, and he came and visited to get a haircut, and he saw the social work, economic work we were doing, and said, "You should become a CDFI." And so I was like, "A CDFI? What is that?" And then he was like, "You should Google it." And so, so I Googled it and, started doing research, and I saw this enormous application process and requirements. And I was like, man, I don't feel like, we're already doing a lot. We're Title IV school, post-secondary institution, and we, maintain the regulatory compliance to run that institution. And I just didn't feel like I had the energy to do anything else. I said, well, we just continue to do what we're doing. I don't really need all of that. But then I was like, well, and then little did I know that in 2009, payday predatory lending was banned in Arkansas. And so we started there was more and more of a demand. So 2 years later, so let me pull back this CDFI legislation and start looking at it. And so that's what I did. I started researching and coming from the background of a post-secondary institution school director, we look at federal registrars all the time. So I was like, well, let me go see what the federal reg says on it. I sit there and I need to understand this because I don't want to just be a title. We want to be a good performing CDFI. If this is what's there to help, then we need to be able to do a good job of doing it, but we have that good understanding. And so I found one line in there in the legislation that said that CDFIs, their purpose is to rectify any economic disparity in their target market. And so I started thinking about a target market. I'm like, well, so at any rate, we had been keeping everything, myself and Artina Blackman is here, and we were keeping everything on an Excel spreadsheet. And so we had this long list of loans that we had made to, students that were in need, to customers that were in need. And we had enough to submit to the Treasury to become a CDFI. And once we submitted the application, 6 months went by, and the day before, I was actually about to give up and throw in the towel because I felt like nobody cared, and I was just, I was feeling really just discouraged with it. And the day before, I got an email and it just said that we had been certified as a CDFI, and you know, my wife was telling me, she's like, no, just keep going, and but getting that letter to tell us that we had been certified was a big encouragement to me to keep going. And so we continue to make loans, continue to understand and learn, how do you serve 45 census tracts, 12 cities, 2 counties from a repurposed shipping container, a small organization. So we got to, we had to, then the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation, and the CDFI Fund, we were awarded a technical assistance award to support the work. And then the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation provided a grant. And then we were looking at the payday lending and saying, well, what makes the payday lender so attractive to a borrower? And it's the ease, and it's the, availability and access, without a bunch of psychological trauma. And so, well, if we could kind of look and feel, but not be predatory, then that would be a safer alternative to predatory payday lending, and it will solve for the gap that's been expanded because of no access. And so we invested to get online, put our product online, and we then beefed up our website and started advertising local radio stations, and the rest is history.
Yeah, wonderful. So I'll stay with you and
Sure.
and talk about your vision for what's next. What's your vision for the future of People Trust? What's your kind of broader vision for what comes next in terms of changing our community?
Well, when you think about the unbanked population, and you think about the underbanked population, and if you take care of the pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves. And if we liken that unto people, for a long time, America has left the pennies, the quarters, the nickels, the dimes on the table, and only did the dollars and the big deals. But and if we rake it in and we rack it all up, then we will have a more inclusive economy, and we will be able to meet people where they are on their financial journey and serve everyone well. And so for the future, everything that we did emerged out of an unmet credit need. It happened. I've always been a solutions-driven person, so it happened because, it needed to happen. And I didn't want to look at, what happened in slavery, what happened in all the history of all this stuff. I just, heard it over and over and over again. But what can I do? What can I do with my team? What can we do to solve for this, for our community? And because we understand the community, we're from the community, and that's when we was thinking, well, we can, we need checking accounts, because when you're making loans, a checking account is a barrier. So we've September 14th, 2022, we chartered People Trust Community Federal Credit Union. So now we're able to provide a second chance to those that have made a mistake or may not be able to get a checking account at a traditional financial institution. And so now we have about 515 members. I don't have Miss Allison and Rashonda and everybody, but yeah. So we're growing our membership, and we're taking a holistic approach to social. It's like a social bank.
So I'd like to build on that a little bit and maybe have everybody get a little more specific about what viewers of this film can do, what the people in this room who have had a history of access to credit and who have an access to wealth across time, what can they do specifically in Little Rock to amplify the change in this community that we see in this way, making huge difference in individual families' lives, but it's piece by piece rather than, I think, the large scale change that all of us would like to see. So I'd love thoughts on how to, and we can start with you, Arlo, but I'd love anybody's thoughts on what can the people in this room to join this cause.
It's a great question. And I was talking to somebody earlier about it, and I was saying, if I'm born into generational poverty, then I don't understand and can see or feel or think what someone that's born into generational wealth life is like. If I'm born into generational wealth, I can't think and feel and imagine what somebody's life is like that's born into generational poverty. So I believe that what the film does is bring both ends of the world together and helps people to take a glimpse into what's on the other side and think about humanity and think about a better economy, a better world where everyone matters. And I believe that if the action, you can share it you can share the film on your social media. Everyone in the room can share it on your social media and talk about it. You can use it as a learning tool. My son called me and said, Dad, he said, they're showing the film in my classroom. He's in 9th grade, he's 15. Think about what happens to the next generation if they understand, the pestilence that's walking in the darkness. We don't know what's plaguing us. If people wonder what's happening to me, why am I experiencing this? But it's generational poverty. It's the mentality. It's all of that. And I believe that we can also, if we have educate on CDFIs, the partnerships, the importance of the partnerships with CDFIs and banks. It's not we're your enemy. No, we're partners in progress.
Excellent. Anything y'all would like to add about what y'all came out of this experience saying, this is what other individuals who have had access to credit, what they can do to be change agents in this space?
Well, I think, John and I are both documentary filmmakers because, we would like to see a better world. And we hope that this film, as Arlo mentioned, can open a conversation. And we all know that this is an issue not just in Little Rock, but all over the country. So what Arlo is doing, we see as something that is very replicable. And we hope that others in their own communities will start their own CDFIs and begin to do work in their local community in the way that he's been doing his here. Beyond that, I think that...
Well, just building on that, the Arlo talks about the size of the racial wealth gap in this country, that it's $1 trillion problem. The CDFI fund is distributing hundreds of millions of dollars a year. That's great. It's the proverbial drop in a bucket in terms of really providing the amount of opportunity that needs to be created. People can spread word about the film and get it used in state legislatures in Washington to really, as President Clinton talks about, and really advance his mission. There should be a much larger appropriation. It should be quadrupled. It should be multiplied by 100. So then we'll have meaningful change. I asked Arlo the other day. We were in a meeting with some, high finance people, and so we're talking about how much money, does he need? As much money as the government and foundations will give Arlo, he will be able to make loans with it. The need is that great.
I just want to add that Arkansas, in itself as a state, everyone in this room can encourage your representatives, your legislators, our governor to make it a CDFI friendly state. A CDFI friendly state. There's an initiative that's going on across the country where states like California are embracing the work of CDFIs, and it's really better in their local economies in their states. So an inclusive economy is what we hope that everyone in this room can encourage.
Can you talk a little bit about what a CDFI
Sure.
friendly?
CDFI friendly would mean because when you think about the educational gap, the acronym, for example, the work of a CDFI, if you're rectifying economic disparity, then there are groups, the National Community Reinvestment Coalition, the NCRC, and they do forensic type of lending landscape analysis. So CDFIs use these tools as resources to take a global snapshot of a geographical location to see where loans are being made, where home purchases are being made, where banks are located, and that information informs where we need to start working first. Where do we deploy our products and services first? And some of those areas are assessment areas for banks. Well, if I'm gonna rectify and I'm gonna bridge the gap as a CDFI, then I have to go to that bank and I have to talk to the compliance officer, the CRA officer. And a lot of times, I was met with a lot of opposition. And I wasn't there I got you or none of that. It was just a lack of understanding and education about the law.
Thanks. So we'll close on this question, and we have to congratulate you on the Oscar nomination. And we are all, of course, rooting for you. But one question from an audience member that came in, we know a whole lot about the way that feature films become nominated. We know about some of the campaigns to make that happen. Short docs are different beasts. And so could you talk just a little bit about kind of how the process for short documentaries, how they become nominated, how they get attention, how does that all play out?
Okay, well, the Oscars are for films that have been in theaters as opposed to the Emmys, which are for television. So our film was shown in a New York City theater last summer for a week, and that qualifies it to be a theatrically released film that can be entered into the Oscars. Okay, so we did that. That's the first step. Then probably about 120 other short documentaries qualified. There's certain film festivals, and if it wins, it qualifies. Okay. There are about 11,000 members of the Motion Picture Academy. Those are directors and actors and cinematographers and hairdressers and set designers and documentary filmmakers. So of that 11,000, there are about 650 documentary filmmakers. And those 650 people, they ask them, raise your hand if you are willing to screen some of those 120 short documentaries, about 150 feature-length documentaries. Short documentaries is anything under 40 minutes. Feature-length is anything over 40 minutes. So people say, I'll watch, I'll give a score. And that first round of voting results in what they call the short list of 15 films. So we made that short list. Then that same group of 650 people are asked, okay, will you watch those 15? Because maybe you didn't watch all of them because you only, were scored, let's say 20 out of the 120. But now we want you to watch all 15 and give them a score. And that 15 gets cut down to 5, and those are the 5 nominees. So we went from 15 to 5. Okay. So now, and this is where you come in. So now, those 5 can be voted on by all 11,000 people. Okay. So we have to make this film as widely known as possible, because everybody knows about Barbie and everybody knows about Oppenheimer, but they don't know about the Barber of Little Rock. Some of them do. But we want to make as many of them as possible know about the Barber of Little Rock. So go on Facebook, go on X, go on, Insta, and just talk about this film. Make sure that as many people as you know are watching it. It is on, it's as easy as can be to watch. It's on YouTube, so just go on YouTube, Barber of Little Rock, there it is. Tell people, go on YouTube, watch this film, send them the link, do whatever you can. The more that people know about this, the more talk there is about this film. We're really hopeful we can use that video of President Clinton talking about the film. That will do a lot of work for us. So anyway, that's how it works.
Perfect. Thank you.
And then on March 10th, we will be there. And fingers crossed. Because I just want to say, being Oscar nominated, it's an amazing thing. I mean, it's a once in a lifetime experience, and it's brought so much attention to the film. And it's for all the right reasons. The film deserves the attention. But if we win, it just is transformative in terms of how many more people will know about Arlo, will know about what's happening here, and will bring about, and hopefully meaningful change.
Indeed. And I think, the way in which art can be an agent for social and political change, I think is just one of the best examples, and the way in which, Arlo, you were talking earlier about how there are legislative goals that come out of this whole endeavor. I think you want the last word, and you got it.
Well, I just wanted to add one thing and kind of backtrack a little bit, because we have had a lot of support from some local banks, First National Bank, the other foundations, Arkansas Community Foundation, Regions Bank, Bank OZK, to name a few. So, I'm just thinking about like all of the interior counties in our state and other places where there are pockets in rural communities that, need the support as well. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and not leave, the people that do help people trust fulfill its mission, the banks, financial institutions, as well as philanthropic communities, out of the conversation.
Indeed. All right. Thank you, Taren. Thank you, Arlo. Thank you, John. Thank you, Christina. We really appreciate y'all. Thank you. We're so glad you're here tonight. Please travel safely, and we can't wait to see you again at the Clinton Presidential Center.